that intrigues people more. And it's kind of pretty neat. All these pieces, with the exception of that one, have been threaded. This one I just made, the finish isn't done on it. I have this piece of the coral off of our beach, piece of ebony, and they are threaded. And a lot of people try it and they end up giving up on it. Usually that's because they're not using good material. Every wood does not thread well. Soft woods do not thread well.
So that needs to happen.
And you need pretty much wood without flaws and blemishes and knots and cracks and real swirly word grain, because those cause problems. They're good things to thread. I'll pass this around. Stabilized woods. Use the cactus juice or whatever, impregnate it, and it basically turns this into a piece of plastic. It threads extremely well. The acrylic pen blanks, those thread very well. Most plastics will thread really well on the lathe, thread chaser. Now there are 3 woods that are exceptional at it. It's ebony, not African blackwood, but real ebony.
Sorry about that.
And pick this up and feel it. It almost feels soapy and oily. The same with this English boxwood. And it's not box elder, that's a soft form of maple. This is a hedge bush, and it's called English boxwood. It's really dense, and feel that again. It's kind of waxy feeling. They have a very tight grain. They thread exceptionally well. African blackwood is quite a bit grainy and splintery, and that does not thread well. The knots out of the Norfolk Island pine, the red part, thread really well. I have some little birdhouse bases I make out of those. You get them almost always the first shot. They just thread exceptionally well. The epoxy resins, those also thread well. So let me pass this around and look at it. I throw it. And when you're doing a thread, you have to make the parts fit right. Now, why thread chasing versus other forms of threading? You can use a tap and die set, which work fine, but with our thread chasing tools, there's one to do the female for the inside of the piece, and the male is for the outer edge of the piece, which we will go into later. But you can use tap and dies. How much time we got? So you have a set of thread chasers, and they allow you to do pretty much all the different sizes. You're limited by fitting this inside the piece. This little tiny birdhouse base here is threaded, and I did it with this tool, and I've done them a lot smaller than this with that. I ground off the whole back of the tool here just so I could get it into a tighter place and do that threading. Now Stuart was kind enough to bring in a couple sets. He's got a 10 teeth per inch and he's got a 20 teeth per inch. And these pretty much look brand new. So the 10 you'd do. We'll pass these around. So they fit like that. This one is for the female or the inside of your piece, and this one does the outer part, the tenon. And these are brand new. What you want to do is all these sharp edges, you should round those over. So they slide really easy along the tool rest, because you're going to be moving them and moving them and moving them. So you need to grind these off. If you relieve the backs of the edge here and whittle it down a little bit, yeah, everything just goes better. You never want to touch the teeth on any metal. Do not try and sharpen the teeth. You sharpen these from the top, either with your grinder like this, or usually just diamond hone it. These tools, what kind of tools are these essentially? They're scrapers. So you treat them like a scraper when you're doing this and when you're sharpening. They hone out really nice, and like all of our tools, they need to be sharp. So we'll pass his around, and you can look at the 10. I use a 16 teeth per inch. Now the 10, it does a really big heavy thread, and it's a lot harder to get it started and get a thread going when you've got such a low count on the teeth.
Is there a benefit to having multiple sizes, or
yeah,
an
because
optimal size to own?
if you're threading something this big around, you want a bigger, heavier tooth, like the 10 teeth per inch. Because I did this cremation urn, and the hole in the top was about like that. And just sitting in my cabinet wouldn't move to change the shape. The 10 is a much deeper thread, so if the wood shifts like it's going to do, you have more leeway. Because I had to remount the lid on that big urn twice and recut it smaller because it quit going down inside there. Just because I don't know if the base probably shrunk a little bit. And threading, you need dry material. You cannot thread wet wood and expect it to fit together. I made a birdhouse once, and somebody wanted a Purple Heart lid, so I went over to the Woodcraft when it was in Pompano, and I bought a piece of Purple Heart, and I made it, but that wood was wet. It had moisture in it, and it fit perfect. And then later in the day, it shook, and the next day, you could just lift it straight off because the lid shrunk so much. It wouldn't grab anymore. The overlap on the 16 threads per inch. How many people know Sonny Varisco?
Heard the name.
He was a aerospace engineer. He built some of the first parts on the first moon lander. And I did a thread chasing demonstration, and then 3 days later I got 7 pages in the mail and some of his drawings. And I've got the original schematics by Sonny. So 16 threads per inch. He measured a bolt. It was 0.370 inches, and he measured the inside of the nut, 0.306. So that's the depth of the thread is 0.064. I measured one today, and it was 3/64 of an inch deep. This thread, this one. So that's the overlap when your two pieces fit together and when they're screwing on. They need to overlap just enough. They can't be tight. Yes, sir. It just takes practice. It's a scraper. You got to get a motion going, and after the first 2 passes, that you apply the tool, and it just pulls itself into it. And you just have to hold it in the right spot with the right pressure, and it'll cut itself. So when we cut threads, they need to be loose and sloppy. This is a piece I did. I had a slice of agate, and the wind blew it off of the shell. But see, that's tight. As soon as you do it that far, it moves. Everything that we screw on or off, you turn it that far, you got to have that looseness of play. When you cinch it down, even the chucks on here, it snugs up and quits wiggling. So that's self-truing. If you have that too tight coming up, you're going to have problems with it. One little coat of finish or something can screw it up, and it's not going to work right. So.
Should you do all your finishing before you cut the threads?
No, I do the threads and then finish it. I always wax the threads. Just that way they were doing it. Like this piece, I had it fitting perfect, and then I sprayed a couple coats of finish on there, and it got in here. And I screwed this down and it would only go part way down. I went, oh, okay. So I just took my threading tool like this and just went around a couple of times and scraped it out, and it worked perfect. Now, a problem I've had at shows, I'll have a nice piece and I'll go, well, the top's threaded, and people take it off and look at it, oh, that's nice. And then what do you do when you screw something back together?
Cross-threaded.
Crank it down. I broke a few pieces trying to get the lids off from people at a show. Just cranking the lids down on it. So you gotta, it depends on the application. Now at a show I do that. I said, when you tighten it, just snug it up. Don't over tighten it. So you just tell them that. This one is pretty self-evident. It stops there to line up with the green. Now, I'll pass a few of these around. This one's threaded. I'm not so sure that top will go on here, but it's on there. It's threaded. You can look at these, and I don't have a piece that fits on. Sometimes I'll make it and it doesn't fit right, or it's too loose, or there's some problem with it, so I'll throw it in a box and I'll make a different piece for this one. Some of these still need tops.
Sorry, boss.
These interns are, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. This went all the way around?
Yeah.
All right, now threading, you can run into some problems and issues. So, zero in right here. You need to make an opening that you're going to thread the inside, and then a 10N where you're going to thread the outside. These are a little bit long, but you know how those aerospace engineers are. And, I'll pass this around. See, this is the one I want to keep. If anybody wants this one, which is about thread chasing, you can pass it around and look at it.
You can give it to me and I can, or you can email it to me and I can scan it.
Okay, this is what Sonny mailed me, so I made one copy of this a while ago. So this is Sonny's notes. Now in that article, they show that they threaded two pieces about that long. On your male piece that screws into the other one, you only need 2 threads on there. However, you need to cut about 5 threads to get those 2 you want up against there. Just trying to do 2 is damn near impossible. I've done it a couple times, but it's really tough. 3, 4 is better, but if you plan on keeping an 1/8 inch of material here, you need to do about almost 3/8. You need to do 5 threads to get those 2 there, and then we're going to cut 3 of them off. The inside piece, you need that at least an 1/8 inch thick. It can be more. Plus, if you leave all those 5 threads on here, what happens? You are putting the lid on and you're screwing and screwing and screwing and screwing and screwing to get it all the way down. And to take it off, you got to go screw, 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 screw. If you only have 2 threads, it goes a lot quicker. So where do we get thread chasers? Craft Supply has some in here. There's 2 different sets. This one set here is 95 bucks for the 2 tools. And then there's an arm brace you can get if you want. I've tried to use an arm brace and it's more trouble than it's worth. You can do it with just your regular tool rest. And then the Sorby ones, which is the one I have, and the ones that we passed around there, are here. But for $130, you get the 2 tools, the gauge, and a DVD. So that's there. Now, there is threading jigs you can get. And they're like 500 bucks. You hook it up, you put a cutter in your headstock, the jig is here with your chuck and your piece, and you have to adjust it this way till you get in the right spot, and then you just crank the wheel, and however many teeth they have here on that. It shows some pretty good pictures in here of this easy thread jig. So however many threads are on there, it will cut with the cutter that's in your headstock. And you want that thing going fast. You want the lathe maxed out with that cutter. And it'll cut a pristine, clean thread. And you can adjust it. I think the smallest you could probably do is like 7/8 of an inch, because the cutter is like 3/4.
Because I have one of those, the cutter is 3/4.
Yeah, I bought one, and
I don't like.
I made my own jig, and it worked great, but setting it up was a pain in the butt. And you can pick up these tools and just whip them right out.
So when you use the hand tools like the Sorby, how
Yeah,
fast do you want to be going?
your RPMs, like 150 to 500 RPMs. I've done it at like 600, and I don't think there's too many people on the planet can thread something with 1,000 RPMs. Your lathe needs to be going slow.
Have you tried to make a thread cutter from a regular cap and die?
What from it?
A thread cutter from a regular cap and
Yeah,
die?
I have. I cut up a tap and die, and I soldered one on the end of a piece, and on another old crappy tool steel tool, I soldered the one on the side, and they work really well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I had a job from an antique store. He had a bunch of these old canes, and he wanted to put a sword inside. So I had to drill them out about 12 inches deep, and those fencing swords,
Yeah,
epis, whatever they are.
yeah.
And he was cutting about that much off the end, and he had this piece that he was going to solder them into that would screw into the wood. So I needed to thread the inside at 13 teeth per inch. And you can't get a 13, so I went up and got a big 1/2-inch bolt with 13 teeth on it. It's a standard size. And I ground the top down and that, and it worked really good. So. It's not a sharp tool.
It's okay, that was small.
Now, if we were going to do a tap and a die, first you need to drill your holes the proper size so you got enough cut. Like this is 3/8, so 2 sizes smaller on your drill guide. You want to use that drill bit, whatever size that is. And we would drill the hole, and then you could try and do it this way, but it's better if you take your Jacob's chuck and put it in here. And you would come up and get the end started. Plus on these, there's different cuts on the end. This is a starter thread. The end tapers down to where there's no teeth. You have to have the proper size hole. You get it in there about 3/16 of an inch, and then you start cranking it in. But if we were doing this on the lathe, we would not turn the lathe on. Metal lathes have, some of them have gears where it'll automatically cut while the lathe's running. But this, we'd have to do this. You crank the tailstock in while you're turning the chuck at the same time. But then you gotta, every so often, knock it off to break off that little curl you're making. Same thing with your die. When you're cranking it on, you do like a quarter turn, go back, it breaks off what's there, quarter more turn, go back, a little farther, go back. You have to keep going back and forth, breaking those off. And then wood is fibrous, and it tends to break off easy, so you need to stabilize it with, say, CA glue, because that's what we're going to do here. So I have a piece of English boxwood here in the chuck. Where did I put my chuck key? So I'll make sure that's tight.
Did you mention that little space at the back?
What's that?
That little space at the back so you don't,
Yeah, I'm gonna go into that. Now, when I'm doing a box or something, in that article that's going around,
No, it's not, it's, I have it, sorry.
that article that's supposed to be going around, well, you can send this one around.
I was trying to look at it.
You got the, oh, we're up above? or-
We're both.
See, they have a big, long thing here and a deep one. Some people make boxes where you have the tenon that fits, the lid fits over the tenon. I always make them with the tenon on the lid so it fits down inside the box, because that way your box, the opening is bigger. What do people do in boxes? They put stuff in and out. So if the opening is down there, there's less chance, but it's just better. Now on the lid, they thread it up here, but then you have the underside of the lid. And when you're doing that, let me show you here. Say we're threading this one. We're coming across with our threading tool. You're cutting your thread, and you have to get the tool off the wood before you hit this side here, the top of your piece. Otherwise, your thread tool will stop, and it'll just eat all your threads right off and destroy them. But if you do make this your base and hollow that, and your lid's there, you got to do the same thing up in here. Right now, with the female side open more, I can just run it in as deep as I want. You have this, if your lid was only, say, that deep, and you're running your thread chaser in, you got to get it off this wood you're cutting before you hit the underside, or it'll stop and eat all these threads off. So that's why I always make the tenon on the lid that fits inside the box. Okay, so you need to prep your wood. Now let's do our female one first, because the female one is usually the more difficult one, just like all things in life. It's a guy joke, okay? That's right, it's a joke. It's not real. It's not true.
Disclaimer.
make sure you do that quickly. A lot of people got tools in their hand.
I'm not going to hear a thing about it when I get home, am I, Cindy?
What?
I'm not going to hear a thing about that when I get home.
No, you'll do it
Not
on
a
the car ride. If you
Okay,
get out
so-
here.
Our tenon and where we're putting it into both need to be parallel, like the bed of the lid. You don't want them angled in or out, because otherwise, when you're screwing the other piece in, it's going to stick and not work quite right. Excuse me. So, this outer surface and the inner surface both need to be parallel. Now there's such a thing as a quarter turn thread. If you angle them both the exact same angle, even if you got 10 threads on there, you could stick the piece in and turn it a quarter turn and all those threads grab, and it's solid as could be. But you have to have them both that exact same angle. I've done it a few times. So what we need to do, we'll work on the inside here first, is make our sides straight. Our outer edge here needs to be rounded over. And then we need to do a little relief back in behind here. So when our thread chaser goes in, it goes off into space. You don't want to leave this straight and deep like he's got in that picture. You could, but it's just much better if you relieve it behind here. So you need some kind of little angled scraper to get in behind and just do a little bit. Remember, your thread is only 3/64 of an inch deep, so just a little past that. I want to use the round scraper first to widen my hole up. Crank up the speed for that. And your wood must be true. This has got a little bit of a wobble to it, and that will create problems. Okay, we're plenty deep enough. I'm coming out here, rounding over my corner. Anybody see the lid to this?
It's right on the
On the
floor.
floor.
Thank you. All right, so first we need to slow the speed way down. This is at 530 RPM by that belt it's on. This is English boxwood. It threads exceptionally well, but I need to cut in behind a little bit. I've got a couple of these little offset scrapers I made out of an Allen wrench. We'll pass one of these. We can pass this one around.
Is that what you use for the rings?
Yeah, you can use that on captured rings too. The black ones are much better steel than the silver colored Allen wrenches. It's a lot worse. So and you need another important tool when you're doing that. This is a hot air compressor, because when you're doing this, you got to get all the chips out. Especially at our next step we're going to be doing later on. Your tool rest must be smooth. Like the tool rest that was on here, there's all kinds of stuff going on here. I've got a file I usually keep in there. This is when I go demonstrate. So I brought my own tool rest. I know it's good. We want to, I have a little paste wax. I've got a candle that I've used for over 20 years sitting on the shelf. I'll just run that across. Because when you're threading, the tool is always in motion on the tool rest, always. If you got something on your tool rest, like there's a little something here, I'm going to move it over where it's really smooth right here. It's a scraper, so with the tool level, my cutting edge needs to be on center or slightly above. So let's run this up just a little bit. If it's too low, you're going to be hitting the bottom edge of the tool, and it just will not cut right. First time I ever tried thread chasing, the first one was perfect. But the next 8 didn't work with the dam because I had it at a different height than it needed to be. So I had an idea. I was thinking about this. Let's slow it down. What if I first turn the tool over and just practice rubbing it on the wood with the back of the tool? I just thought that up today. And that's a really good thing to kind of get you in the motion of doing that.
Also burnishes the wood a bit too.
So when you're applying the thread, the first 2 cuts are critical. You go in with only enough pressure to hold it against the wood. You must be moving when you touch the wood. You don't want to come in straight, because it'll cut straight lines. You can take that thing and run it in straight, it'll cut perfectly straight lines. And, you know, it makes a nice decoration, especially that 10 teeth per inch. So, you don't want to hold the tool too heavy, just enough to keep it against the wood while you're going in. And your second thread pass, you have to come in with just enough pressure again so it grabs that groove that you first cut. It'll jump in there. If you come in with too much pressure on your second one or your third, you will have double or triple threads. There's a green mark, 3 spots on this one. There's 3 starting threads. There's 3 threads that are going down in. It looks like one, but if you look at these green spots, there's a starting thread there and a starting. This one has 2 threads going down in, and this one has 3. And another part, this one, I was going to pass around later. So let's say my thickness here, this is about an 1/8 inch, and I've got like 3 threads there, but only 2 over here, which is fine. But when you're doing your top piece, I undercut this, so there's over an 1/8 inch here with no threads at all. If that's not thick enough, it'll thread on there, but then it'll go past the threads and just spin. The top won't come off, but it'll spin. This was cutting too deep. So whatever I put this on, I have to make sure this surface is threaded about 4 threads deep. So those 2 grab and hold on. So then pass those around and look at them.
So you're saying that those, because they have 2 or 3 threads, they're not, you can't.
They're fails. You cannot cut any thread that's going to screw into that. It's impossible. Right, Stuart?
Can you explain again the green marks?
If you look where the green is, that's where a thread starts.
They're all supposed to start in the same spot.
Yeah, you're only supposed to have 1. Now one has 2 and the other one has 3. And then I'm trying to fit it on the other part, and it'll kind of start and grab, but it will not screw on there. And it's just a big problem. So your first and second threads are a key. After that, you just move it in, lightly bring it into the wood. Once it starts running on itself, you apply a little more pressure. Go up. Okay, and you want to start with your thread chaser off to the side. The first 2 should be about there, and then right away you need to start transitioning around so the teeth on this are straight like the bed of the lathe. But you need to start over here a little bit. You want to try and catch the first or second thread and do a full run if you can, and then come in the second one and full run, and then you start pivoting around so you're going straight in. So
How do you not get a second or third start? How do you get?
if you put too much pressure when you're going in on the second pass or your third one, it'll grab a new piece of wood and just start feeding itself into there. It
You
just,
want it to go into the existing groove.
yeah, that's why you need to come in light, because it's the gentle art of thread chasing. Once it grabs and starts feeding itself, then you apply a little bit more pressure. And one of the main problems is not good material. It's too soft a wood or too grainy or something. And the other one is you're applying too much pressure or not moving when you're going in. So we need to go in.
Lee?
See, if we turn it over and just do this a few times.
You see your head.
Your hat.
It's your whole head in the way, not just your hand.
Okay. Well, you gotta be over here. that article said the handles on these are usually short because it's meant to be used in front of your body. And there is one I saw where it's metal, I think Mike Mahoney sells it. It's like that, and on one end you have the male thread, and the other end you have the female. You just put the tool over and do the other end. See, now that's two passes. And then I'm going around making sure that's straight.
How do you make sure it's straight?
Well, I can see the bed of the lathe here, and I can see this edge.
Can I ask
And-
a question?
Yes, sir.
The gauge of the tool determines the speed you go in or not?
No, just whatever you set it at, because this is 530 RPMs.
No, but I mean, the reason you go into the
Well-
with your tool, you go in with your tool.
Yeah.
How fast do you go in?
Well, you just kind of go in. Once it cuts that first spiral around and the second one, it'll grab the tooth and kick it into the very start, and it'll draw itself in and just cut the thread, because the threads are cut at a slight angle as they go up.
Is it a feel thing, like when you have the tool in your
Yeah,
hand, you
yeah,
can feel it?
you just have to do light, steady cuts, just enough pressure to hold it on the wood. Like once it starts cutting, then you put a little more pressure. And depending on, like I can keep going because this is kind of hollow. When I did this, I can just run the tool all the way off. There's a lot of room in here. It's gonna do nothing. But if you have a piece like this and you're going in, you gotta get it off the wood. Like right when you start, you gotta think, get it off the wood because it'll rip up there really fast. By the time your brain gets all the way to your hand and you take it off before you crash into that, it's kind of what you gotta do. You're gonna screw it up to start, but that's like all of our tools. You have to go through a learning process.
Lee, have you got enough room to move closer that way back?
Oh yeah, plenty of room.
That's good.
Is this even on the screen?
No.
Where do I go that way? Or this?
No.
Now, let me get this around and then,
Oh, okay. So that looked like it cut a really good thread. And again, this is prime material. So that one is good. Now for the male, or the easy one. Guys are easy, right, ladies?
So,
I mean,
easy.
understanding and manipulating us.
Yeah.
I was hoping Rena would be here so we could teach her that. Okay, so on the inside, your cutting edge, where it touches the wood, at center or slightly above. Because where a scraper touches, you want 90 degrees or less. You don't get catches. 90.5 degrees, catches and dig-ins occur. So on the outside, 90 degrees or less is at center, dead center, or slightly below. So I'm going to be on the outside here. This needs to go down a little bit. And for you newer people, whenever you change a tool, before you turn the lathe on, stop and check the height. Make sure whatever tool you're using, how you're using it, is different. Like a bevel rubbing cut with the gouge, you want the tool higher, the tool rest. If you're doing a scraping cut with the gouge, you want it lower. So, and see, I want to hold the tool down here, and that's still way above center. So I need to take it down even more. All right, so the outside of our piece, I'm going to go up. This is fine. Maybe we should go
Here.
sideways.
There you go.
Does that show up there, or is that only up?
Just a,
I want this right here in the camera.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so my tenon, the side needs to be straight, this outer corner needs to be rounded over. And then you need to cut a little groove back in the corner. If you don't do that and it swoops up like that, that thread chaser, when you get up there, is going to grab and ram itself into this side, destroying it. You do a little relief back here that kind of eliminates that a little bit, the chances of you doing that. So first of all, this is slanted like that. I need to true it up and flatten it. Find the parting tool, speed it up a bit.
I don't like that finger below that.
Looks like what?
I don't like that, your finger below that,
Yeah, I got the finger under the tool rail. Now I can see the straight bed lathe here, so I can adjust that to that. This new bench table is a little crooked, but the lathe is straight.
He is the operator.
Did you make this? Did you make this?
Yes.
He made an awesome table for this lathe. I mean, this is really good.
Just a little crooked.
You raise that up to prevent the tools from rolling off.
Operator problem.
Got properly fitted PVC in here. It's a bigger tool, you can just remove that. That's good. If you want, we could thread these so they screw.
that brings up a point. Glad you mentioned that. Some of the turners that I know that use it, they start off with PVC just to get used to
Yeah.
cutting the threads instead of going through this and.
Yeah, you can do that. You can buy something like this or pick up the PVC off the street and just cut a short piece, stick it in your chuck, and you can practice on PVC pipe.
You're not losing a box.
And that threads better than most woods, but you need to do that. Now, once you're done with your tool, you need to put the protective cover back on because you do not want to damage the teeth. You chip the top teeth, you gotta grind the whole thing down, and it really reduces the life of these. But I've had these for at least 18 years, maybe 20. And I've threaded hundreds of pieces.
How do you sharpen those?
You can do it on a grinder,
Stay away from the tip. itself.
upside down like that, just barely touching it. But if you take the diamond hone, get it on there and just do that. And the ones on the left half, you use more often than the ones on the right. The ones over here hardly ever get used unless you're trying to do a big wooden nut and bolt. Some of those are pretty cool. And you just kind of hone it up, feel it, sharp, let's go. You don't need to grind them very often as long as you're honing them properly.
Thank you.
So I didn't do my relief. I like to use the spindle gouge to get it inside there. Way up or down?
Up.
Okay, so I'll put it with the bevel right on my side here. See it in the camera?
Yeah.
It will be.
And then just go straight into the corner and I'll push it in a little bit and I'll cut my little groove. You can use your parting tool on its side where you take this bevel you have here, put it flat on that wood and go in and cut the groove with it that way. But you need to have the cutting edge below center on the outside because you're using it like a scraper. You can use one of those 3-point tools, which they show in that article, which is just a round rod with 3 bevels on it so it comes to a point. I prefer a spindle gouge because a couple reasons. I can come in and cut this surface absolutely clean and cut that groove at the same time. A lot of times the parting tool will not cut up in here, it'll be torn and grained. Whereas this will cut it absolutely clean when done right.
That's the hard part.
I was gonna say not like Roger does it, or Wanda. Okay, so I cut a little relief back there. We need to slow it down again. So we got till 8 o'clock? Or 25 minutes? All right.
7:55.
Now, again, we need to kind of get a rhythm going by hitting round over the top. I'm going to take my parting tool, round over this edge. If you just cut a 45 on there, there's still a hard corner that when you're going, you can grab those teeth and force them to go straight. So make sure I'm at center or below. Again, I'm angling the tool over this way a little to start. My first 2 passes are like that, and I transition around till the face of it is perpendicular or the same line as my piece. And see, if you're doing extra ones, like the 3 on this side, I really screwed up. You could hear it because I was going in a little too fast and jumpy. But once it goes, I only want 2 threads up here, and usually those come out perfect. See, and I was going in with too much force. See, right now I'm just letting the tool cut itself. And when you need to stop and go, release your tensions a little bit.
How do you know when to actually stop cutting?
Well, you got to stop and look at it. But I find there's about 20 passes you got to do. Like the tops of this tooth here is all the way deep because it's pointy, but the one up here still got a flat spot on the top. So, and you want to get it.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
With the laid off, present your tool to the thread, and
Yeah.
you're going to be able to see how deep you've cut,
Yeah.
and you better be able to cut all the way in.
Yeah, you can, and you don't need all the way, because if you have both of them absolutely to a point, and you got one little particle of crumb in there, that can cause it to bind up. If they have a little bit of flat top, that is good. And you can also, if you're working up tight here against this, you can also do it by hand. Just hold the tool there and spin the lathe like that. Now, as you're going, you need to watch where the chips are coming off the tool. Because if I'm coming up this way and all the chips are coming off here and not up on these first 2.5 teeth, that means I'm cutting an angle like that instead of straight. This is kind of angled, but these last 2 are pretty straight, and that's the 2 I want. Okay, now that's pretty good thread. Now sometimes when you're coming in, especially when you're starting, you'll come in right on one of those flat tops and you'll cut a thread right down the top center of the thread you just cut. So that's why you have to go in gentle. This would be better if I kicked it down a belt because you got 250 to 680 RPMs. So I'll pass this around. We've still got 20 minutes, and I was going to let whoever wanted to come up and try this.
But then you're saying, what you said before, so that has a lot of threads on it, then ultimately you want to take off those bottom
Yeah,
threads, right?
yeah, I would just come in with the parting tool. I would crank the speed way up and just come in and cut them off like that until I had the 2 that are left. Plus, you want to sand over the edge just a little on the inside and the outside. That will help it start better. Now remember, this is good wood to do this with. Most of the stuff we have is not. Bottle brush, heartwood isn't bad. Our mahogany is okay, but not as good as bottle brush. But pretty much everything else, I mean, crabwood will work. So you can see the thread I cut inside and the outside there. All right, now, if it's something like this, where I have two different woods that are contrasting, it doesn't matter how you line them up. Unless you're using some wood with some grain that you can visually see here, you may want to cut it so it lines up where you stop, so the grains are all going the same way instead of a grain going that way. The piece will look better. So let's say we have a piece like this. If I don't have the chuck, this goes in. So,
How do you control where it starts, where it stops at, so you can line it up with the grain?
that's what I was going to go into.
Oh,
But I could probably make this work.
Between centers.
No, I need to cut it off. True. Not even close. Don't be lazy. Put this back on. Did have a perfectly good box link. I took the small chuck and was making something for here.
The apprentice?
Yeah. It'll go down to 1 inch with the jaws that I have on there. That's perfect. Good. Okay, let's say we got our tenon. I'm going to part this off. This will be the top of my lid. I'll have a tenon like this to go inside there. Just a little more. Skinny part. I'm using the parting tool to take this top off, and you never want to cut it all the way through with the tailstock on, because that wood will pinch sideways, grab your tool. And that happened to Ray Ryland once, and it went swing, and it stuck in the far wall of his garage. Plus, you want to widen the hole a little bit as you go down. If you saw me going a little left, right, doesn't have to be much, but it needs to be there. Where did my Jacob's truck go? pilot hole for starting. Let's say I'm making a box. Oh, and you made a custom twirly handle too.
Absolutely.
If you just have that rod that sticks out, make yourself one that spins. It's so much nicer.
Special twirly handle.
Yeah. Mine are all burl. Some of them have turquoise in it. I'm serious. Okay, I just want to do a little quick shallow hollowing of this. Cutting edge, center or slightly above. Feel the need for speed.
What tool were you just using?
What's that?
What tool were you just?
That was just a round nose scraper.
Joe's tool.
Now those calipers they have in there, in the magazine, those are good, but you don't really need them. And in that article they talk about making a no caliper tenon. So, on the piece that's going to have the male thread, we up or down? You turn a little tenon that fits inside what you've already threaded, just a shallow one, just so it fits in snug. That way you know that is less than what you need, and you can turn the outer part down almost to that, because it needs to just kind of fit into the hole. Because remember, you got 3/64 of an inch on 16 feet per inch. Those 10, it's quite a bit thicker. So if you double that, 3/64 here and 3/64 there, it's 6/64, so it's 3/32 of an inch difference, so they fit. And you cannot have the one part too big and think, oh, I'll just do 40, 50 passes and make that thread bigger. We're people and we move and stuff, and there's different densities in the wood. Your hole's going to go oval, or this piece will go oval. So it's got to be almost right there. You thread that the one time and that's it. You cannot keep going and going because it's not going to work out. I've tried that many times. So I need to hollow that out to there. So we got 15 minutes, 12, 5. Okay, see that's just about fitting in there. If I go ahead and round over the outer edge, I'm going to cut back behind a little. Now, my cutter is too low to be used as a scraper. It's supposed to be at center or slightly above. But if I angle it down, so the point is way down, it won't grab. If I have it up flat, I'm going to get a dig it or grab or something. So just want to make sure that edge is flat. Now, most woods are not good for threading, so we need to stabilize it. Sometimes you can wax it, and that's good enough. Like this part of rosewood may thread good, but the sapwood won't. So we need to take some CA glue, the thin runny stuff, and saturate it. You need to do outside the edge just a little because you will be cutting at the start. If it's not what was in that box, which said good materials, I glue everything. Every piece I do. Because it's just, the hundreds of times I've done that, it just makes for better. And once you glue it, you need to get the excess off. Because you hit it with the accelerator, and if you have a drop in there of the thing, it's going to get that big white foam, maybe even smoke a little bit. Slow it way down, find our female thread. So this, I want to make sure it's up at the right height. I can see pretty much center there. Angle over. I'm going to turn it over, do a few passes. And see, I'm doing my body. I'm not trying this with my arm. If I'm doing this, I have much better control than if I'm just trying the arm thing. In bad wood, you only want to do 4 or 5 passes and then re-glue it. Because you will get down through the glue you just did, and those little peaks, those fibers will start popping off. So if you glue them as you go, it turns out a whole lot better. And if you want successful thread, that's just what you have to do. You may have to glue it 6 or 8 times. It takes you 20 passes to cut a good thread, and every 4 or 5, you got to glue it. Thank you. Well, sometimes you're all right.
I appreciate that.
Sometimes you're fabulous.
I'll leave my wife's phone number, call her and tell her.
You're going to get a video of this. Now, Bonnie Klein, she's been kind of getting out of the wood turning picture, but she used to be like the most well-known woman wood turner. That's why you got to have a long hot air compressor. She says a thread with 1 chip in it is a failed thread. So,
What if it has 2 or 3?
well, that's
Then it's okay.
for you, Roger. That's a success.
But most of us.
So let's say my teeth are fine and perfect. I just want to take a little sandpaper, round over that edge. At this point, this should be done, this surface. Sand that up. You can even roll it if it's small and sand the inner edge of the threads. But pretty much the whole inside of your piece should be done when you do this. Like I was going to thread this, and it's about an 1/8 inch. It'll take 2 threads on there, but I'd rather be alone when I'm doing this one because of the good chance it's going to cause a chip or something.
Do you stabilize those threads at the end again, or?
Yeah, I usually do it once more with the glue and then just go in to clean it up, like 2 light passes. But after that, we take the wax, whatever it is. This is just some of that brie wax in the can. Bonnie Klein used to use clear shoe polish as a finish on her spin top. So I just take this is a soft wax, and we don't want it going too fast. You just come in and then maybe you want to take your paper towel and just buff that off. Like the underside of these, I'll do the whole complete underside just to make it finished. Now, let's say this one is done. It'd be exactly like what we did on that little yellow piece. And this is done and it screws in fine, but let's say, are you on the up? Yeah. Let's say we screw this on, it stops right here. So what I need to do is come in with the tool and shorten up this surface a little. So we'll just use a parting tool right now. And 16 teeth per inch. That means every 16th of an inch thickness or distance this way is one full thread. If this stops, and it stops about there, and we want it stopping there, I'm about 180 degrees off. So I need to take off a 32nd of an inch here. You want to do little bits at a time. So let's say I did that. I'm using this long edge like a scraper. And you should sand that edge again. And then you got to blow the chips out of the thread. Those threads will cause it to bind up. Now let's say I screw it on again now, and we were here, and now it ends up right here. So I got about another, almost a quarter of a turn. I will come back again, reduce this down a little. And if you did that one first, you reduce this part here. Just cut it back slightly, and you keep going until you screw it on and it stops about, say, right here. Then you can snug it up to where that grain lines up perfect. So
you only do it to the female.
well, no, usually I do the female part first because that's a little more difficult than doing this one. So usually that one's done, so I'll just cut back this surface. You're only cutting not even a 16th of an inch off of it. And it's real easy to cut too much. And then I would lubricate these threads too and screw that on, but then how do I cut the bottom off of my piece? If I screw this on, that is now my gem chuck. I'll put the center up, cut the outsides together if I need to, cut this top off without the center on, get the top done, take it off, but now I have to make a jam chuck. Take this one off. I got to thread a scrap piece so I can screw that one on, put the center on so I can cut the bottom off of it. So you always got to do one extra thread. Bonnie Klein made some jaws for a chuck out of plastic because she basically did this one size. And she had a chuck which opened and closed a lot, and she threaded the inside of those jaws. And no matter how she opened them up, they always fit perfect. So you could put her piece in there, tighten them up a little, and just screw it and it'll stop. And it won't be crushing the threads. Any more quick questions?
So in essence, it doesn't matter which part you do first.
This one is a little bit harder, so it doesn't matter. You can do one first. Like the one little box lid that I have, wherever it went.
They're probably over here.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, if they don't fit or don't look right, this one's done already, so that one's done first and there. If it's the opposite, I have one in here like this. That one's done first, so I do this one second. So it just, whatever works.
Based on what you said about wanting to do that other piece by yourself, it seems like there's like a big cry factor if you...
Just because I have to concentrate. Well, if I take a big chunk out of it, since this is just so thin, and that's a bottle brush burl bark, which is pretty fragile, even though I glued it. So if I take a big chip out of there, I just got to open the top up bigger. Plus, you can see how this one angles down like that. Sometimes you need to, where did I put my pencils? This surface here, I would need to undercut that at an angle, so when I screwed it on, that rounded piece, it fit down snug. But usually I plan that in, and I'll do a little flat across the top here, so I don't have to undercut that so severely. So this, a lot of this and a lot of that. So.
Make one and adjust accordingly.
Okay, so the next meeting, everybody's going to have a threaded piece for the instant gallery.
Well, that was my next question, is what would be your recommendation if you've never done it? If you practice.
Get with somebody that's done it. Like he said, he's done a bunch. Have you ever done them, Stuart? Because those tools look brand
Not
new.
successfully.
Not successfully,
That's why
okay.
the tools are still new.
All right.
Want me to bring them in for you?
Well, if you're really interested in it, get with me and you can come over to my studio and we can work on it. If you have your own thread chasers, that's great. This is the only set I have. And I mean, Gerhard Schwinke up in Palm Beach, he has probably 40 different sets, and they're all different teeth. So about 16 or 20 is the norm. If you have like good wood, the 20 is good. If you're doing something bigger, you need less, like that 10, but that 10 is really hard to start. Because there's such a jag in there, it wants to just grab. You really need that corner rounded over a lot. And you need to plan to do extra wood and cut it off, just because that's just so hard.
But it'd be good for like a large diameter, right?
I really wouldn't do that, just because the wood moves. If you turn a collar and thread that and glue it into that piece, that's better. The collar out of a better material, that's the thing to do there. And using a flexible adhesive to glue them together. That way, if the big piece does move a little, that collar won't move. And if you're doing something that big, there's really no reason to thread it.
For fun.
Yeah, it's fun. You're a fun kind of guy.
I saw there was
You need 2 TDI.
online a brass inserts for urns
So
Yeah.
that you can use.
glue them in.
I have PVC pipe, threaded
Yeah.
pipe.
I've used those on salt shakers instead of that bung plug.
Yeah,
There's a little fitting you can get and a little screw for electrical box. And just put that in there and screw that thing in. But my old boss, they were replacing all the fire hoses in their building. So I got all the big brass couplings that were like that screwed together. And they're probably like 6 teeth per inch on those. But yeah, there's always different ways. I know people that did jar lids. And it's just everything you can do. But good materials, good smooth, lubricated tool rest, just getting, yeah, and like I said, I turn that tool over and just rub it on there while the lathes running with no teeth, just so you get that feel and motion about coming into it, moving, and just riding it along. That worked out really well. I'm glad I thought that up.
well, I think the stabilized wood,
Yeah.
good wood,
Oh, that,
and then stabilizing the threads.
yeah, that is awesome. But
Because
CA
I've tried it
Wheeler,
twice with the Sorbies that I have,
yeah.
and it was just the wood was chipping. and-
Yeah, you get, that's why I, if it wasn't in that box of the good stuff, I CA glue everything. Even bottle brush does thread pretty good, but not perfect, and I'll CA glue that too. So, that's it.
Thank you very much.
All right, any questions, feel free to call me, or if you want to come over and just give it a try.